Hello and welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with Marathon Dreams. Episode 31, dealing with marathon anxiety. Or more specifically, actually, dealing with marathon training anxiety. And I'm doing this one today based on some feedback that I've had in my running community and the people that I coach. If you want any more details on that, of course, head on over to 12 Months to Marathon and drop me a message or comment 26.2 on one of the posts and we'll get you the details sent across to that. Now, where am I at the moment? So I'm nearly at the end of week 11. And again, this is another reason why actually I'm talking about this, because I've got the four probably most challenging weeks now, 10 to 14. So in those weeks, there are two 20 milers and a 22. Now, I've done a 20 miler this week already, and it was the most in control I've felt, to be honest, over that distance, which demonstrates the compound effect, which is also a podcast in this series. So feel free to search that on at the compound effect. And it just shows how marathon training adds up over time. And that's why it's important to do all the runs. And actually, as I record this, yesterday I did a 3-mile run on a treadmill in the gym before I had a strength training session. And the reason why I did that, because you might think to yourself, well, why did you do like a little silly 3-mile run on the treadmill? It's because when I've got a weekly running target, that running target matters. And I want to hit that running target. Now, an effective marathon training plan, in my opinion, based on the ones I've followed, should give you a range of miles to hit. So it should say this week you need to do between 40 and 46 miles, for example, right? So if you hit 43, you're in the middle. If you hit 40, well, you've hit the minimum. If you hit 46, fantastic, you've hit the maximum. But you want to try and work within that range. So I want to work within my range this week, so I had to do those extra 3 miles. Because for me, I understand the importance of how all those miles add up, okay? And this fits into what I want to talk to you about in terms of marathon training anxiety. Now, I'm using marathon as an example, but this could be half marathon. So what we're focusing on primarily here is a training cycle that's got a bit of time to it. So half marathon training cycle is 12 weeks, in my opinion. Marathon training cycle is at least 16. I know there's 18s and 20s out there for a marathon, but I think, 16 weeks is the ideal for a marathon. You can get away with 12 if you're conditioned already. But for most people, and most people listening to this are either first timers or looking to improve, 16 weeks is the ideal. Now, marathon anxiety is basically, and pardon me, but I might have explained this principle to you before, but I want to do it again. Now, the way you want to look at marathon training is like a jigsaw puzzle, yeah? So you're 16 weeks, and your goal is to make sure that at the end of the 16 weeks, you can recognise the picture. Now, you might have some pieces missing of the jigsaw, but you can recognise the picture. So let's say the picture was of a cat. You can at least identify the cat and the colour and everything else. But you might have some pieces missing. If you've got loads missing and you can't identify the picture, you've then got a problem. So you have to look at the whole marathon training cycle as 16 weeks, and it is a jigsaw puzzle. Now, along that 16 weeks, you might get injuries. You might get bad weather. You might get lack of motivation. You might get things that really throw you off. And that's perfectly normal as part of the marathon training process. What we've got to avoid is getting inside your own head. Because if you get inside your own head, you are going to potentially ruin the end of the story. And the metaphor of a story is really important here. Because if you look at most stories, and there's a book I think called The Hero's Two Journeys, which talks about most stories, when there's a hero, they go on two journeys. So they go to where they're going physically, but it's where do they go as a person. Okay. Now, when I lost weight all those years ago, I first studied some stuff back then from a guy called Jim Rohn, Rohn, Jim Rohn. He's passed away a few years ago. He was Tony Robbins' mentor. Tony Robbins you potentially heard of. And he was an old school, quote unquote, motivational speaker, but it wasn't motivational. It was common sense. And it was back in the early 80s and 90s, so it was all just common sense based. There was no fluff. There was no abstract theories. It was all just common sense. And one of the things that he said, it's not the goal, it's the person you have to become to achieve it. And that always stuck with me. So life's about not what you get, it's about what you become. And I think marathon training is not about what you get, because ultimately you're going to hopefully get a marathon at the end of it, and a medal and a t-shirt and a goodie bag if you're lucky. But it's who you have to become. But dealing with the adversity and the anxiety, as I call it, is part of the journey. Okay. Now, I heard a fantastic analogy for anxiety a few weeks ago, which was anxiety is the the ego projecting the past onto the future. I'll repeat that. The ego projecting the past onto the future, which basically means that because you feel certain things have been a certain way in the past, they're always going to be that way in the future. So let's say, for example, you have an injury during marathon training, and it's not an injury that's going to destroy the whole cycle. Yeah, because if you break a leg and you're not going to be able to train for months and months, that's different. I'm talking about things that perhaps with a bit of physio, with a bit of support, can be fixed. If you project the past onto the future, you might think, well, when this happened before, blah, 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 yeah? And then all you do then is think about the negative consequences of what could happen, and you stay thinking negative, 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 so then you attract more negative to you, okay? So then the self-fulfilling prophecy of not being able to run the marathon happens because you've wished it into existence by focusing on the negative, okay? Oh, that's important. I want you to listen to that again. You have created a self-fulfilling prophecy by overly focusing on the negative aspects of it. Now, one of the things that I've said to my running community, spoiler alert, is focus on solutions. So go and get the solutions, find the solutions. If you go and see a professional, say a physio with an injury, for example, and they turn around and say, you are not running a marathon in 16 weeks, then you've got to deal with that, which is another thing to deal with, yeah? And it's another process to deal with, but you've still got to deal with it. It's your responsibility to deal with that. But if a physio says, right, here's the plan, you've got to park the problem and focus on the solution. Because if you focus too much on the problem, you will attract more problem. I'll say it again. If you focus on the problem, you will attract more problem. If you focus on solution and you're courageous, you will attract more courage and you will attract more solutions. And that's how you deal with marathon anxiety. Another example, if you have a bad week of training, it's going to happen sometimes, yeah? Now, what I do, because I've got 2 kids, we've got no help, and I'm obviously busy, and we've got a renovation going on and all these things going on, which none of this is bad, right? But it's stuff you have to deal with life. And I put myself on a little bit of an island because I'm training for something, but I'm a sort of an outlier. And what I mean by that is that I'm the only one in my family that trains like that, which is fine. That's the way it goes. So I have to make sure that I've got responsibilities at home that I take care of before I just go off and swanny off for a 2.5 hour run, if that makes sense. I can't just do that and expect my wife to pick up all the pieces and leave the kids on their own. You know, those sort of things that some of you will have to deal with that stuff, and that's part of what we do. Now, if I was 20 living on my own with no responsibilities, different kettle of fish. But I'm not, so I have to deal with that. But what I do is I'm willing to trade off everything else for marathon training. Yeah, and that's me. For 16 weeks, I'm like, right, okay, I'm not a big drinker, I'm not a big socialiser, I don't do any of that stuff in that sense. I've done all that in my 20s to excess. It doesn't really interest me anymore, and it's what I'm happy to trade off because I'm not lacking anything in that sense. So doing this makes up for that, and I don't miss it. I've got 2 young kids, quite young kids. I've got a family. I like spending time with family. I like chilling out at home. Those things don't interest me anymore because sometimes people will dig me out and say, well, you need to social. You don't need to do anything. You can do whatever you want in life. My job at the moment is to focus on getting this marathon done. When I've done that, I've then got another half. And in case you don't know, I've been fortunate enough to get a place in the Great North Run here in the UK, which is a very famous half marathon, which is as hard to get into as London. I've managed to get a place through Birmingham Children's Hospital, which is a cause dear to my heart because they looked after my son on numerous occasions for quite a big operation when he was very little. And of course, I don't know a lot of you, but if you do want to sponsor me, you can go to my link in my bio on Instagram at 12 Months to Marathon, and I'll be happy, but there's no expectation there. But if you do feel that, that's something you want to support me on, I'd really, really appreciate it. Anyway, so I put all that and I trade off that for marathon. Yeah, so I make sure that I do everything possible to find solutions. Have I had a few niggles during this marathon training cycle? Yes, I've got a little ankle thing going on. I had some pains in my feet, which I was like, great, I'm going to get plantar fasciitis. These little touches. So I've made sure that I've looked after myself to the nth degree, okay? Because that's what I do. Now, sometimes that doesn't happen for everybody. Sometimes people do get injuries, they do get niggles. That's going to happen. What's the solution? Yeah, allow yourself a small amount of time to wallow, which is fine, is normal, and it's called the PRP process, which is a great way of doing it, which is permission to be human, reconstruct, and perspective. Permission to be human is allow yourself to be annoyed or ticked off, or whatever language you want to use there. Get through that phase as quick as possible. Reconstruct is what positive can come from this, and then pick the final piece, perspective, which means if I'm at that start line, right as rain, will it really matter? The answer to that question usually is no. Okay, so use PRP. but allow yourself to go through the annoyed phase. Injury, setbacks, whatever. But think about the story and how you want to finish the story, okay? And the finishing of the story will be you stood at that start line going, look at what I overcame to get here. And that'll be more of a rewarding journey. That's not to say you create problems just to overcome them, but it's a better journey because you are able to say, I overcame this problem and I'm still here. But if you focus too much on the problem, I promise you, you will attract more problem. When I tore my hamstring last year, granted it was only a small tear when I was going for my 10K PB, I made a conscious decision to say, I am not going to let this beat me. I'm not going to overly talk about it. I'm going to just deal with it. And I did, and I felt better because of it. Yes? So hopefully this is making sense. So you are going to get some level of marathon anxiety if you do get setbacks, but I need you to be solution focused. What do I need to do to solve this? Yes, because remember, misery loves company. And if you laugh, the whole world laughs with you. If you cry alone, usually. Okay, so sympathy's fine, but condense it. Only a small amount. Give yourself a day, and then you've got to move on because you've got a marathon to run, and it's a long-term cycle. Yeah. And that's just the reality of the situation. Yeah, you've got to get on with it and deal with it. It's not about masking any emotions because you have to release those emotions. If you're feeling upset because of something, and this is what I've said to my running community, allow yourself that emotional release because otherwise it'll be like holding a beach ball underwater. So if you need to cry your eyes out for an hour because you're injured, do it because it'll allow that. Don't mask it. Don't pretend you're okay because then that you'll suppress it. Don't pretend you're okay that you've had a setback because you'll suppress it and you'll act it out in different ways. What you need to do is express it in a positive way. Cry, speak to somebody, engage with people, message me on Instagram if you want to, do whatever you need to do to let it out. But then you've got to get back to the plan and you've got to get after it because you can still do it as long as, like I said, you've not been told that it's over and you can't train for 16 weeks. Because if you're following a 16-week cycle and you miss a week, you're still going to get round and you've still got time, okay? And you've always got time as long as it's not too late in the process. And again, you're not told it's completely gone. And if it is completely gone, then again, same principle, allow yourself to wallow and just move on to the next thing as quick as you possibly can because you might convince yourself in that scenario that you can never run a marathon ever again. And that's particularly not true because obviously many people come back from disappointment and do it again. So make it part of your story. Look at the marathon as the end of the story. You are going to get ups and downs. So don't get too excited when things go well. I.e. don't go and smash out a fast run and then think that everyone's going to be like that because I've made that mistake on a lot of occasions. It doesn't work. But also don't get too down when things don't go your way. So things are never that good. Things are never that bad. Chill out. You'll live longer and it'll be okay. So setbacks are part of the process and if it's the way you deal with them that matters. But honestly, use that PRP process, permission to be human. You have to allow yourself the time to be annoyed and release that emotion. Otherwise, it will build up. Reconstruct. How can I use this to push me forwards? And then finally, perspective. If you complete the marathon, will it matter? No. And you'll have an additional story to tell. And I love stories, me. I love the people who tell the stories and they're able to do that. So don't get inside your own head. Don't start questioning whether you can do it or not. Just focus on solutions if you are facing adversity during a marathon training cycle. And I promise you, you will get through it. Okay? That's episode 31, how to deal with marathon anxiety. If you follow me on Instagram at 12 Months to Marathon, I post a lot of stuff that will help there, just general stuff that will help. I've also now launched my 12 Months to Marathon Plus podcast, which is exclusive content, which I'll be filling up with stuff, which is stuff that I would only post in my coaching group normally, so little additional longer form coaching videos, and it's $7 a month. So if you want additional content from me, all you need to do is hop over there and subscribe, and I'd appreciate it. But again, you'll get stuff from this, so either way is fine with me. I appreciate that. If you do want any more detailed and structured coaching, of course, all you need to do is hop over to Instagram, follow me at 12 Months to Marathon. You'll get all the free content you need over there. And if you do want anything else, all you need to do is drop me a message or comment on one of the posts with 26.2, and we can have a chat about your journey and how we can help. But I appreciate the follows and I appreciate all the support. So that's this week's. Don't forget to like and share and write a review of this podcast. I do appreciate that, and favourite it and do whatever you need to do on whatever platform you need to do to share this and get the message out there so we can help as many people as possible achieve their marathon goals and any other running goals we can in 2025. Thank you very much for listening as always. I do appreciate it, and I'll speak to you all very soon indeed.